In this video, I'm going to go through one of the most common questions I get and a super important nuance of the dental school application and admissions process, which is the dental school application and admissions timeline. I'm going to go through common misconceptions, mistakes people make, so that you know exactly what to do, when to do it, and when to submit your application. So let's dive right into it, and I'm going to give you the experience that I have from advising over 500 pre-dentals, which has led to over 2,000 acceptances and even $2 million in scholarships for my students. I graduated from UCLA School of Dentistry and served on the AADSAS Advisory Board. I've also served as a National Pre-Dental Liaison and the National Go Dental Liaison. I also served as the California Pre-Dental Chair for the American Dental Education Association. Again, that was a one-of-one position just encompassing the California dental schools and California universities. And I'm the founder of Predenting, a dental school admissions advising company where we have former admissions officers and admissions experts like myself to help guide you through the admissions process. So the first thing that you need to know is the dental school application has what's called a soft open date and a hard open date. The soft open date is the first day that you can actually create your application, create an account and start filling things out. And that always lands in the month of May. And the specific date is typically May 15th, plus or minus a day or two, depending on what specific day of the week May 15th lands on. Now, I highly recommend the day that the application opens, you create your account and you start filling it out. But you won't be able to submit your application until the hard open date. And that's what hard open really means. It means the first day you can actually submit your application. And that date lands in June. Specifically, it's typically June 1st, again, plus or minus a day, depending on what day of the week June 1st lands on. So you essentially will have like a 2-week buffer period from the time you can create your account and application to the time you're even allowed to click submit to submit your application. And for context, this is all for the AADSAS application. Everything for the Texas application, the TMD SAS application, is essentially pushed forward by 2 weeks. So the TMD SAS application, the soft open date is typically May 1st, plus or minus a day or two. And the hard open day, or the first day you can submit your TMD SAS Texas dental school application, is going to be around May 15th. Now, one of the most critical things that I see pre-dental applicants mess up is looking at application deadlines. And if you focus on application deadlines, you're frankly probably going to ruin your chances of admissions. And the reason for that is because application deadlines do not matter. What matters is the fact that dental admissions is based on a rolling basis. So while some dental schools may say that their deadlines are not until November, December, or even the following year in January or February, by that time, especially in the new year, most of the acceptances for dental schools have already been released and most of the seats have been filled. So think rolling admissions, not application deadlines. I essentially want you to ignore application deadlines. So what does rolling admissions really mean? Rolling admissions essentially means that the same high quality application submitted sooner is going to do better than that same high quality application submitted later. Simply put into some sort of graph, this is the best way I could explain it. Essentially, your success rate with the same application is going to go down as the months go by. And the rolling admissions basis isn't on the time scale of days. So it doesn't matter if you submit the first day or the second day or the third day. What matters is if you submit in the first month or the third month. So think of the rolling admissions basis on the time scale of months. And that's exactly how I labeled it here in this graph, and that's why. One of the really critical points I just want to emphasize is the fact that I mentioned earlier, the same high quality application submitted sooner performs better than that same high quality application submitted later. And the reason why I really emphasize that is because I have had pre-dentalists come to me, not who I've advised, but pre-dentalists come to me after they've applied and have been rejected and need to reapply. And they talk about how they were so fixated on submitting on the first day the application opened. Don't get me wrong, if you can submit a great quality application on the first day, that is great. However, if you are rushing to go through your application materials, like your personal statement and your secondary essays and things like that, because for most dental schools nowadays, you must complete your secondary essays in order to actually submit your primary application, then if you're rushing through those things and it becomes so rushed that you haven't really put in your absolute best effort. In other words, your application is a little bit lower quality than it could have been if you just waited a little bit longer, put more time, energy, and effort into it, then that might backfire on you. And it has for a lot of pre-dentals. So I don't want you to think I must submit on day one or even week one or week two. If you need the time to put together a very high quality personal statement and a really compelling application, that's going to serve you better than an application that was quickly put together and just submitted. And if there's one big takeaway I could leave you with this rolling admissions process and this graph, it's that you want to be applying in June or July, ideally, and ideally not applying in October or later, because that's typically going to be too late. So now you might be wondering, okay, but what if I'm taking the DAT in the summer, let's say in July or even August, and then it's going to take 2, 3, or maybe even 4 weeks for my DAT score to be released? Should you submit your application without a DAT score and then update your application once you get a DAT score? And my answer to that is typically no, you shouldn't do that. And the reason why I say that is because your application without a DAT score, even though you can submit without a DAT score, will not be reviewed by dental schools. In other words, you will be submitting an incomplete application, and that essentially doesn't serve you any good. And amongst the many, many myths and misconceptions that get spread like wildfire among pre-dentals, one of the ones that I hear every year and so often is, oh yeah, you should submit your application even without a DAT score if you can submit it early. And the reality is that's a fallacy. I've not only been a part of the AADSAS Advisory Board, but I have also worked with a lot of people who've served on admissions committees, and I've confirmed with many admissions offices that if you submit your application without a DAT, you essentially have submitted an incomplete application that goes in a separate pile and does not get reviewed or even get queued to be reviewed until your DAT score is in. In other words, until you have a completed application. And if you're finding this video helpful, give it a like. And if you want more of these kinds of videos to help you on your pre-dental path, feel free to subscribe. So now that we've talked about the importance of submitting your application early, I want you to think about how am I going to reverse engineer my application so that I am ready to submit early. And one of the first things that comes to my mind, because it holds so many pre-dentals back, is are you getting your letters of recommendation on time? Because now is the time to start thinking about and potentially getting your letters of recommendation. And if you're a pre-dental who's thinking, I'm going to submit my application in June and I'm going to get one of my spring semester professors to write me a letter of recommendation, I would quickly caution you against that. Because what I've seen a lot of times is if you're taking a spring semester professor and then hoping that they can write you a letter of recommendation in just 2, 3, or even 4 weeks, a lot of times those professors will say no, they'll be too inundated with letters of recommendation requests, so on and so forth. It becomes really risky, in other words, to ask professors from your spring professor right before the summer that you're submitting your application for letters of recommendation. So think ahead. The other thing I would really recommend you to think about is your personal statement. When are you going to start that? Have you already started brainstorming, outlining, or drafting your personal statement? Because if not, now is the time to get started. A high quality personal statement, a really killer and convincing personal statement, even for someone like me who's helped write hundreds of them, still takes time and many, many drafts. And you really need that high quality personal statement to stand out with how competitive and cutthroat the admissions process has gotten. So there is a Chinese proverb that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. Well, the best time to start on your application materials, like your personal statement, was yesterday, and the next best time is today. You don't need to wait for the application to soft open, or even worse, hard open, to start working on your application materials. And if you want to get started with your personal statement or your application materials, I would highly recommend that you download my free personal statement guide. You can get that by scanning the QR code on your screen or by going to predenting.com/PS guide. And it's my gift to you to help you get your personal statement rolling. I would highly recommend downloading the guide. It includes a lot of gems that are going to help you write a great personal statement. And then a lot of you will also be thinking, when's a good time to get started with admissions advising so that I can make sure my application in its entirety, my personal statement, my secondary essays, my activity descriptions, my application questions, going through school selection, getting those letters of recommendation, so on and so forth. When is a good time to start getting all those things in order and get started with admissions or application advising? Again, the same thing applies here. It's never too early to get started with application advising. It's never too early to get started with your personal statement. In fact, I would say time is your biggest enemy when it comes to the rolling admissions process because time matters so much. So today is the day to get started. It's never too early. And the earlier you get started, the more time, if you work with me, the more time we have to diligently go through your application and really make it stand out. So assume you turn in your application. Now, when do interviews start getting released? So some schools, although it's pretty rare, start sending out interview invites in like mid or late July. And the bulk of interviews, as shown by this graph, really gets going in September, October, and I would say early to mid-November. And then things start to taper off around Thanksgiving and going into the winter break. And that's because right around when winter break begins is Acceptance Day. Acceptance Day is the sweetest day of the year for me. It's like an early Christmas. And I love to hear about all your acceptances and all the exciting texts that I get and emails. And these are just some of them. It's truly my favorite day of the year. But Acceptance Day for you is going to be in December. And typically it's mid-December, right around December 15th, plus or minus a day or two, depending on what day of the week December 15th lands on. And after Acceptance Day, around December 15th, don't worry, there's still more to come. Because after December 15th, more interview invitations get released for January, February, and March in the following year. So a lot of schools will continue interviewing candidates. And after the official Acceptance Day, which is the first day anyone can get an acceptance from a dental school that's in the AADSAS application, after that day, schools can release acceptances at any time. Truly, anytime until their dental school class begins. So you can hear back on January 20th, you can hear back February 22nd, you could hear back February 23rd, June 1st, up through the summer if that dental school does not start in the summer, and even up until the fall. And I've even seen situations, although it's super rare, where a couple days before classes begin, someone gets an acceptance. And just to be clear, when it comes to rejections, dental schools can reject you at any time. They don't need to wait until Acceptance Day to reject you. Anytime after you submit your application is fair game, starting from the very first day that your application was received. So now that you know how the dental school application and admissions timeline works, you want to check out this next video to hear from pre-dentals who've gotten insane numbers of acceptances, how they did that, and if you'd like to work with me, how you can go about that too.